We'll jump into it. I know we've got a lot to cover today, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So we'll get rolling here. I'm going to be going over, sorry, I'm going to turn my phone on silent. We're going to be going over our traditional distributor education, but we did add a couple more things that we wanted to talk about today. There's been a lot of draft regulations. I wanted to give you guys a brief update on what's happening at the state level. And then we also have Adam Wilkins here. Has been my go-to for insurance, all things insurance, particularly for on-premise needs. And he's been really working and advocating for our group to get, more suppliers and providers online working in this category. So save your questions for that section. We'll do that towards the end, but Adam will kind of give us an overview of what's happening and what's available to everybody. And then, you can ask your questions either in the chat or in the Q&A section, whichever works best. But we look forward to that. And Adam, thank you for joining us. I think this is going to be really valuable for everyone.
Thank you. Really happy to be here. Thanks, Diana.
Of course. All right. So if you guys are new to this monthly call, we do a monthly call to kind of educate people on the category and keep them up to date on what's been going on in the marketplace. Our goal here is to make sure everyone is educated and familiar with this category in a way that allows them to feel confident with the business decisions they make. We are not a legal entity, so we do not give legal advice, but we try to provide guardrails and guidelines that can help you make those decisions. But certainly, if you're looking for legal advice, I definitely recommend you contact a lawyer. Love your lawyer, love your consultant. That's the best route to go. But this is really so that distributors and retailers, as they're making their decisions, they're able to select brands that are high quality, going about things responsibly, marketing accurately, using appropriate verbiage, testing requirements, all sorts of things to make sure that they put safe products on the shelves. There's an inherent trust that comes with Total Wine & More carrying these products. So, we want to make sure that these retailers feel confident in that. And if they only put the highest quality brands on the shelves, we're indirectly keeping the consumer safe because they won't have access to some of the products that might not have all the qualifications. That being said, I've always said this, I think beverage has some of the highest quality brands. It's too expensive to enter this space, and you're generally working with brewers. So they're going to make sure you're following all the rules. So generally speaking, it definitely feels like we don't have as many bad actors on the beverage side, but sometimes we don't know what's happening in different markets. So we want to make sure that education is there. But to introduce you to the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives, our goal here is to educate and influence federal legislation. We created a code of operating conduct that outlines how we want to see this category regulated in the future, and something that promotes consumer safety, which is one of the primary things that we hear about on the Hill at the state and federal level. So our mission was really to create a unified voice between the hemp beverage industry as well as the alcohol industry. So we're coming at this together and echoing the same message so that we can get our THC beverages into mainstream distribution and into retail partners where other adult beverages are sold. Our recommended regulations are listed here, 21 plus. We want the access to alcohol distribution, third-party testing, typical no marketing claims, no health claims, no structure function claims. We want standardized packaging, and we define low dose as up to 10 milligrams per serving and 100 milligrams per package. Obviously, each state has the opportunity to regulate their market as they see fit. So we'll go over kind of what we're seeing market to market in a little bit. These are a couple of our board members that have supported this group and founded it, late last year. Really, our primary focus right now is the appropriations bill as well as the farm bill, which again, we'll go over in a little bit so that you guys are up to date on what the key markers are and what we're doing to keep our category open. So for a lot of people were new with this particular presentation, so I wanted to introduce myself. Diana Eberlein, I'm chair of the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm about a 15-20-minute walk from the Hill. So as a result, I represent this category on a fairly regular basis on the Hill with our lobbyist. Just like CABA, which is a beverage-only coalition, I'm beverage only, meaning I only consume THC through beverage. It was the only way that I could control my experience with THC in a way that worked for me. It blended in with my lifestyle, but it also, because I'm a low dose consumer and these products are accurately dosed, it made it very easy for me to control and build my experience based on how I'm feeling in that moment and what I'm doing in that moment. Because as we all know, the environment often dictates what beverage the consumer chooses. So I am particularly passionate about this category, and I feel that this can really impact a lot of people's lives. So that's my personal why. And I do remind everyone, it is not either or. I still love my red wine, and I collect a lot of wine glasses. And sometimes to be fancy, I'll put my cannabis drinks in those wine glasses because I enjoy feeling like I'm having a cocktail from time to time. So moving right along, new adult beverage alternative. I think people are getting more familiar, obviously, with these products, but one thing we want to make sure everyone is clear on is D9 is D9. D9 is THC, THC is THC. It's the same compound, regardless of whether it's from hemp or marijuana in your beverage. It's really a dosage conversation that we focus on. And that's why we defined low dose beverages up to 10 milligrams per serving, because those are typically where people start usually at 2 or 3 milligrams, kind of see how they feel, and then they gradually increase. And 10 milligrams and under, those products aren't really sold well in the dispensary channel. They were 0.3% of the regulated market. And on top of that, because there's sometimes limited co-packing options and the popularity of 100 milligram beverages and tinctures and, 100 milligram 2-ounce shots that are in the dispensary channel, the popularity of those has actually created a bottleneck where co-packers sometimes don't even have the capacity to produce the lower dose products. And they're less of a priority because there's less margin, they take up a lot of space, and they don't traditionally move well in the dispensary channel. So by allowing these to be sold, through hemp, through the traditional retail channels where alcohol is sold and served, we've been able to prove the demand for this category, which has been really exciting to watch because it feels like it happened overnight. It wasn't overnight, but it definitely feels like so much has changed in the last couple of years. So these products are available in low dose and high dose options. However, the high dose options will always be in the dispensary channel, or that's what we're promoting, is that they should be in the dispensary channel. Low dose products, again, that up to 10 milligrams per serving, are available in traditional retail. They're generally available in ready to drink options. That's probably the most popular, where you see the most options as well. But there's also multi-serving and ready to pour options that are kind of like a spirits product. We're also starting to see ready to mix beverage additives. So, a single serving and a liquid or powder stick pack, we are starting to see those more and more emerging, which makes them extremely transportable. So that is preferred by some consumers as well. Benefits of the beverage. This is, like I said, the reason that I found beverage and really found it worked for me is because it was an enjoyable, consistent experience that I could build upon. But it was also familiar and discreet. I could bring these products to a party, share them with people, walk them through kind of how they're going to feel. And no one's looking at us differently. These blend into any social setting. We hear a lot about the soccer mom and how the soccer mom is the target demo here. They very much are, to a degree. And if they're comfortable walking around, a barbecue with these beverages, we know we've kind of struck gold there. So these have become socially acceptable, and they're becoming more normalized day by day. One thing that's different about beverages than other consumption methods is the onset and the offset. They're extremely consistent and therefore sessionable, just like beer or wine. Your onset, meaning when you're going to start feeling the THC, is going to be between 10 and 20 minutes. Now, keep in mind, with a beverage, you're not going to get all the THC in one sip. So you can't have one sip of the beverage and then assume in 10 minutes you're necessarily going to feel anything. This is really going to be a gradual, timeline. So after you finish the beverage and you've had, a full serving, that's really when that clock kind of, has already started, but that's when you can start thinking about, okay, I should feel it in probably the next, 5 minutes. Depending on the pace of your consumption. The offset is generally between 60 and 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. This again allows for adults to be in control and know when they can, drive their car again, when they're going to feel, in control and like they can operate heavy machinery. This is very similar again to if you were at a brewery or a winery and you want to make sure that you've given enough time for you to consume the product, have it go through your system, have a good, enjoyable experience, but again, not be overly intoxicated, and you're not stuck, like sometimes this happens with traditional edibles, where that that experience just keeps going and you don't know when it's going to end. We've eliminated that problem. And part of that is because of the emulsion technology, which we'll jump into in a little bit. And as I mentioned, the first sip is the same dose as the last. These beverages are incredibly stable, and that's due to the advances in emulsion technology. And what emulsion technology does is it breaks down the particles of the THC into small, very small particles, and then enrobes it in the emulsion technology, which disguises essentially this product as water in your body. So your body absorbs it as water instead of oil, which would go through your intestinal tract into your liver and process there. This allows you to start absorbing it within the intestinal tract. So you actually start feeling, that's why you start feeling it faster than a traditional edible. You also don't have to break down any other material. If you have a brownie or a gummy, your body has to break down that gummy. So before it gets to the active ingredient. So that also delays the timeline. And everyone's different. Everyone's metabolism is different. So everyone is going to have a slightly different experience when it comes to edibles. But with beverage, we've really fine-tuned it and makes it very safe for on-premise consumption. Traditional, I kind of went over this, but this is a good visual for those of you that are maybe a distributor and you've asked, for emulsion technology, you've asked questions about what this is. We've gotten a lot of this from regulators. We actually have documentation that shows when the onset of the THC within a beverage hits, and then when you start to see the decline. So you can see in this graph on the right that the max absorption when you start to feel it is 60 minutes, and then it goes down. But you're growing that entire 60 minutes before, and it starts, I think, as early as 7 minutes is when we've seen some studies saying that that's when people start feeling it and it's entered your bloodstream. So this is a good visual to understand how THC beverages impact your system. And then you can trust, again, the sessionability of this product. Target consumers. So essentially these should be, they're adult beverages, right? So something for every adult consumer, 21 plus. We've seen a real sweet spot with the younger generation who's looking for alternatives to alcohol. We've also seen this pick up with the elusive soccer mom that used to, we always used to swear the soccer mom existed, but she didn't go to the dispensary channel. She's going to Total Wine, she's going to Specs, and this is where she's picking up those products. So we've definitely seen a growth between, I would say, 30 and 45-year-old female, 50 years old, but we've also seen boomers really take liking to this product. As they've gone older, they want healthier options to consume. And this is something where they are able to, eliminate smoking and other options for consumption. A lot of our consumers do not identify as cannabis consumers. And I think that's a key differentiator. And to a degree, I feel like I'm that person. I do consume these beverages, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a cannabis consumer. I don't know anything about flower in terms of what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to roll a joint. There's just things that I don't really want to do because beverage is my choice. And again, how I've learned to control my experience. And I will share, when I first started exploring cannabis, I did try other consumption methods, and they are great for some people because smoking, that onset is immediate. It doesn't have as long as of a duration. So again, probably relatively sessionable. But for me, it just was too difficult. There was a lot of research that had to be done. And frankly, I was doing a lot of trial and error, and it was more error for me. And when I found something that worked, I just stuck with it. And I think that, people who are curious should absolutely feel free to try other consumption methods, but this is certainly a great way to get familiar with THC and see how you respond to THC in a low dose format. So target wholesale clients. This is essentially where we'd like to see these beverages on a regular basis. So we want to see them at licensed alcohol retailers, restaurants and bars, and event and entertainment venues. And that's where the insurance is going to come in. So Adam will get into that in a little bit, but that's going to be, I think, the next wave of growth for these beverages is going to be the on-premise consumption and where we can see these beverages really get normalized. The fun fact I always like to include is Minnesota. Some restaurants reported an increase in desserts and appetizers at tables that were ordering THC beverages. So it's true. The munchies are real. And, that might be a pro or a con for you. But it was fun to see that the restaurants that were really getting out of, some of them, some of the breweries too, that were getting out of the red after COVID, were actually able to have, larger cart sizes at checkout because people were ordering these products to go, they were ordering desserts to go, and they were selling more. And that's always good for business, especially a group coming out of COVID where their business had been shut down for, nearly 2 years. Drink responsibly. So just like any other adult beverage, you need to learn your tolerance. And we want you to learn how to do this responsibly. Most new consumers to cannabis will have between 10 and 15 milligrams of THC in a single drinking occasion. So that's not one beverage. That's a number of beverages over, a 2 or 3 hour timeline. We always say start low and go slow. What we mean by start low is starting around 2.5, 3 milligrams. That's a good starting point. And for many people, they compare this to similar effect of like a light beer or a small glass of wine. But it's going to be different for everybody. Some people are more sensitive to THC than others. So that's why we recommend you start low at that 2.5 range. And then, wait that 20 minutes, see how you feel after you finish it. And then we will, then you can continue to consume. Sorry, I'm going to close this out. I don't know if you guys can see that, but we will get to some of the questions at the end here, but thank you guys for submitting some. But these are basically what we want is for people to find this approachable. So this is a generalization of where you should start, but everyone is going to be different. So just like you had to learn your tolerance for other adult beverages, same thing applies here. Market shifts. So the cat's out of the bag, right? We've been saying that for a long time. We've been saying that for a long time, but now what's nice is the alcohol groups are starting to say it too. So we have more support and we have a little bit louder support than we've had in the past. So we've really joined forces. Right now, the regulations vary, but there are 32 states that you can pretty much sell these products in relatively freely. But again, the regulations vary. Retailers are seeing 20% growth month over month, which is the fastest growing category they've ever seen. And the market projections, according to Fortune Business, are showing that the global size of this marketplace for THC beverages exclusively is $117 billion by 2032. About 81 billion of that will be in North America. That is, of course, if regulation allows for these products to be distributed, to the masses, and we continue getting regulation in place. But that's a huge number. And let's face it, 2032 is just not that far away. And we know how fast this market works. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this category grows over time. Regulatory. So we updated this map and then almost immediately a bunch of draft regulations came out. But this is a good visual where it kind of starts. I would dig into this before just taking it for, as if it's in the Bible. Every time we create a graph or a map that is updated, something changes in a market. So there's constantly refining regulations happening, particularly right now because session has started. So there's a number of markets that we're going to get into in a little bit that have draft bills that are out that are currently either asking for markup and feedback, or we should expect to be given to a committee to vote on. All right, states to watch. Frankly, we could watch all the states at the rate we're going, but there's a number of states that do have draft bills out there. I've listed some of them here. California, we know we have an active ban. Texas has, Dan Patrick has had a ban risk out, and right now has been hearing from lots of groups as to how to regulate these categories to see if these can stay illegal in Texas. One of the number one concerns we always hear is about the kids. So it's really about getting rid of the bad actors. So if we can put the guardrails in place that protect the good actors, that's going to be a win. We all know that bans really don't work. Bad guys are going to do bad things. They're going to break the rules regardless. So a ban doesn't necessarily impact them. It does impact the good actors who follow the regulations. We have a number of bills here. I've listed them all. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I will mention South Carolina's got a bill that looks very similar to the beer 3-tier system. That is probably the closest we've seen to something that, it mimics kind of how we want to see this category regulated moving forward. And then we had the total opposite thing happen in Alabama, where they tried to reschedule it up to Schedule 1, but for hemp, which, by the way, you can't do. Bill 132 will likely be dismissed because we actually have a case study on this. This happened in Texas years ago, and it was thrown out because you can't do that at the state level. You can't reschedule it. Tennessee has some new regs that they're drafting up, and they're actually higher than what we are recommending for their market. What's interesting about that is right now Tennessee does have higher dose products, and they haven't really had too many issues with those higher dose products because they're being sold through the liquor channel, and you have to be 21 over and in those markets, and how they're displaying those products. They have a number of things they are going to change. For example, anyone who's actively in Tennessee right now knows that one of the requirements is to put the product behind the counter. Beverages are big. It's just not feasible. That's not how these stores were built. So they are adjusting regs like that to make these more accessible. But the dosage cap that they are proposing is up to 25 milligrams per serving, 250 milligrams per package, which allows for a multitude of sizes of multi-serving products, magnums, things like that. So that bill is very interesting to us. One thing we are seeing in a lot of states as well is the ban of direct-to-consumer, which is what groups like WSWA and NBWA have been telling us for the last year, is states have a very difficult time regulating their markets when direct-to-consumer exists. It's just hard for them to, control their marketplace and enforce regulations when brands can pop up in various markets and ship direct. This is something that we've kind of expected, but we're seeing it more and more. A great workaround for this from a regulatory standpoint is to work with a group like DoorDash to lobby for same-day delivery solutions, those on-demand solutions. Because let's face it, when someone wants a beverage and they want to order it, they want it right then. So if they can place that order and it goes through the approved system of the state, that DoorDash, employees going and picking up that product from a licensed retailer, and they are coming and they are going to check your ID and make sure that it matches the credit card for payment. So these are workarounds that will work, and they keep the consumer safe. And at the end of the day, that really has to be our top priority. And there are solutions to this. Obviously, I know a lot of brands right now, I think 40 to 60% of their revenue is coming through direct to consumer. So I understand that the idea of direct to consumer going away is scary for a lot of people. The goal would be, if this is being sacrificed, you are getting access to mainstream distribution in that market. You are getting access to the bigger distributors. You're getting access to, whatever channel they're approving. It could be a convenience or liquor. We're obviously promoting that these products are sold anywhere where alcohol is sold and served. So the goal would be that if this is being given up, you are getting something that is extremely valuable. And I think a lot of groups also figured that this is where they would be going. I don't know if we thought the states would do this as quickly as they are, but we are seeing it more and more. So these are just things to keep in mind. Other things that we're starting to see are licensing requirements, either getting licensed for the state, so that basically it's something that can be taken away if you violate a rule. That's the same thing that alcohol groups have, where they have to get a license to manufacture or distribute anything else. It's nothing really different. As long as the prices are similar to alcohol, and not something that's grossly taxed or overpriced and doesn't keep people out of the market, we feel that this is a fair requirement that we are starting to see more often. Obviously, we want to see testing from a third party. That's obviously something that hasn't changed, whether in the regulated market or in hemp. And then there's the channel to market, which is kind of a fight that is being handled, I would say, at the state level right now. Convenience store versus liquor. If you've worked in the cannabis community for a while, we kind of always assume we're the only ones fighting internally about what the regulations should be. You know what? Outside of us, it's actually not all about us. Convenience stores and liquor stores, have been fighting over territory for years. So in some market, it's going to be different. For example, Tennessee, to go back to Tennessee, they just got beer and wine into grocery 10 years ago. So the likelihood of getting THC beverages, even though they're very comparable to beer and wine, into grocery in the early days of this category are kind of slim to none. It's definitely going to be an uphill battle in some states to go into grocery, but it doesn't mean you don't have access to liquor. And those are certainly good options, for us to get our foot in the door, start building trust with these regulators, these states, and continue to normalize our category so we can see that incremental progress over time. Appropriation. So I want to dig into this a little bit because I talked about this on the last call, and then I got a lot of questions about what appropriations was. So appropriations for basically the Department of Ag subcommittee is a budget bill. But what happened after the Miller Amendment was language was provided that would ban hemp for the budget bill. The budget bill is voted on this March 14th, so under a month. So if it's banned through appropriations through this budget bill, it is banned. So this is just as an existential threat as the Farm Bill. I think a lot of people assumed when the Farm Bill got kicked out that everything kind of got kicked out. We still have to get this language out of the existing bill. Now, from what I will tell you, it does feel like it doesn't belong in the budget bill. Also, if it is put in the bill, then you have two conflicting bills. You've got the Farm Bill, and then you have the budget bill that basically have conflicting statements. We want it, if it's been regulated already through the Farm Bill, they feel it should be corrected in the Farm Bill, but we don't want to just rest and hope that that's the case. We continue to educate, and actually next week we are doing some really targeted meetings with a number of the board members, going into offices, meeting with these key committee members, educating them on this and what we want to, the guardrails that we might want to see in place if we don't have the option of getting that language removed. But I do feel cautiously optimistic, knock on wood, that we might see this get pulled out of the budget bill. Therefore, we would be focused on the Farm Bill in terms of making sure our category stays open. The number one thing we hear about in these meetings is consumer safety, and it's the high potency products out there. The other thing we've heard a lot about is new and novel cannabinoids. As they've gotten more educated on hemp, they realize that there's converted material, synthetic material, there's cannabinoids that don't exist naturally in the plant that have been created that are 10 times more intoxicating than D9. And frankly, a lot of those ingredients are what's used by some of these bad actors. So they are looking to kind of clean that up. What we've kind of taken the approach of is we want naturally occurring cannabinoids to be what's kind of saved and protected if we had to put guardrails in place. But for our category in particular, when it comes to an intoxicating cannabinoid, we are focused purely on D9. We need to simplify this for this consumer because we are dealing with a mainstream consumer that is just getting their head wrapped around THC. With too many cannabinoids, it might get a little confusing. I do believe in the future we will have more intentional beverage that has a lot of different cannabinoids. Breeze and Happy have been two that have created functional beverages that leverage different adaptogens and cannabinoids to provide a desired effect. And I love that. And I love that they tell the story and educate so well on it. It might be too much for some consumers early on, but that's okay. We're going to get there in time. Our goal is obviously to eliminate that language from the budget bill, but our plan B is for permissive language, which we did draft, and WSWA has aligned on some of that messaging as well. So we definitely are prepared if we absolutely have to, make a concession there. And I'll put this here. We can talk about this a little bit, but the sticking points that we bring up, which is helpful in many of these conversations, is the revenue comparison. The question that we get a lot is, well, how much are you selling now versus what you sold in the adult rec space? One brand actually said in a meeting they sold more last month than they did in 2.5 years in the dispensary channel. It's a huge difference, right? Obviously, they were in 1 or 2 states, but when they hear that sort of difference, they realize that this is an opportunity that if it goes away, our category in particular really suffers. So they've requested permissive language. That's why we have prepared that material. But in the meantime, we've prepared a code of conduct and additional education information for them to continue to understand our category in particular. Then we have the Farm Bill, right? Miller Amendment, I think we're all really familiar about how we ended up with this risk. Same thing. They're worried about high potency products and consumer safety. And a number of people on the Hill do feel that they were duped with the 2018 Farm Bill. So a lot of it, when I go in there, I somewhat fall on the sword a little bit. I know that they didn't mean to legalize intoxicating cannabinoids from hemp, but this allowed for us to create the case study and show demand for our category. So as a result, I know that's not what you intended, but thank you for that. And when we take that approach, we warm them up a little bit because beverage was a little late to the game, candidly. It was 2.5, 3 years ago that we really started beverages creeping into the hemp side. We were still trying to figure out what we could do, what was legal. I remember being on those early calls with a lawyer and a brand, figuring out, how to get the raw material and if this qualified or not. We were a little late to the game, candidly, but it gave us the case study we needed. And as a result, now we can provide solutions for the Farm Bill that support the farmers and keep the regulators happy. So again, our goal is to remove that language entirely. And then our plan B is essentially that we have permissive language that protects our category as well as the other categories in hemp by protecting the naturally occurring cannabinoids within the Farm Bill. So here's the thing though, in the next 9 months before the end of this year, we're probably going to see in 15 states implement hemp regulations, which brings it to a total of 30 that actually, around 30 that have hemp regulations in place. At which point do we have to make adjustments to the Farm Bill? Because the states are handling it and they're starting to get better at doing it too. We're also seeing less bans. We're seeing more people come to the table with solutions in their draft bills. And granted, they're not all perfect. There's definitely some concern, obviously, like what I said with Alabama and their rescheduling of hemp. But we're making progress. And a lot of the conversations we're having, the feedback we're getting is extremely positive. Proposed regulation support, there's a couple things that have been really helpful. Naturally occurring hemp-derived THC, nothing changes for the farmers who shifted after the 2018 Farm Bill. So we continue to support them, which is why a lot of these southern states are actually very supportive of hemp. It would eliminate new and novel intoxicating cannabinoids. So it would be the ones that, frankly, no one really asked for, but are generally used by some of the bad actors. If they are transparent, if converted materials are transparent with how they're being created, and then we can test for those, that's a different story because then we know what ingredients have been used to create these products. And if we understand how intoxicating they are, we can figure out whether this is something safe for consumption. But we need that transparency. We need that information. We don't want to ban things. We were not rooting for anyone's business to fail. We are hoping that everyone is successful here, but we do need to keep the consumer safe because as much as we're talking about these bills and protecting our industry, we also have to remind ourselves that if a consumer gets sick, it could be the end for all of us. And that could be whether it happens with a beverage or a gummy or flour, it could be anything. So I feel like our real race is to get the regulation in place so that we can protect the consumer and we mitigate that risk entirely. So as I've mentioned, we also have a regulatory pathway. We've created a code of conduct. And this is, one of the biggest benefits, as everyone here has talked about quite a bit, I'm sure, is that this is a new tax revenue stream that they, didn't see coming in the past. And we're seeing be very successful at the state level. I'm hearing of bills being drafted where they're taxing per milligram. At like 1 cent per milligram. I've heard of tax structures like Minnesota, which is 10% across the board. There's various ways to do it. I think working with the state to see how they do it currently for other adult beverages is very helpful because we don't want to create a program that is difficult for them to implement or enforce. CABA principles, we kind of went over these. This is the hemp-derived D9, 21 plus, third-party testing with a QR code so that everyone has accessibility and transparency. This is also very helpful for distributors and retailers to verify that the product that they're putting on the shelves or in their trucks is safe. Sold where alcohol is available, no marketing to minors, chain of custody, and obviously no health claims. We also want standardized labels. I think a lot of brands and sure distributors and retailers on this call have seen various labels. There are some best practices. And, this label here by High Spirits is one of the very thorough products that we've seen out there that has the universal marijuana symbol. Or I should say hemp flower, I should say the flower symbol, but cannabis symbol, that is essentially to make it very clear to the consumer, hey, this is an intoxicating product. This has THC in it. You also notice it says the dosage very clearly on the front. There's a QR code for the third-party testing results. There's the location of their manufacturing facilities also on there, as well as some of the warnings that are traditional with adult beverage that are on the right-hand side. You also notice a full nutritional panel. Now alcohol for a very long time did not have to do that. It looks like the recommendation now is that nutritional panels will be something that they'd like to see in the future. With our category in particular, since many of these products are positioned as kind of more health and wellness products than anything else, it allows for kind of proof, right? This is 8 calories in comparison to what, a White Claw that's 100. If you're making those comparisons, that is a big deal. There's also, other beverages out there that are in the THC format that are low dose that have high sugar. There's something for everybody. It just depends what that consumer's looking for. But if you are analyzing this based on a health and wellness standpoint, having the nutritional panel there is helpful. And I think it also continues to build trust, again, with the consumer, the distributor, and the retailers. Frequently asked questions. We get this question about THC beverages and if they're legal to sell. From a compliance standpoint, there are, concerns. And I think anyone who is at WSWA, people heard Jillian Schauer, I'm probably not saying her name correctly, but Jillian, who's I believe the executive director of CANRA, made a comment about how THC, even though the extracts and derivatives of hemp were legalized through the Farm Bill, that did not mean that they were legalized through the Food and Beverage Cosmetics Act. So that requires all ingredients to be GRAS status. No cannabinoid has been granted GRAS status, but the rest of the ingredients in these beverages are GRAS status. And I know the emulsion technology being used has received, GRAS status. So there are, questions about whether or not, that we have conflicting bills, but these products are being sold and, it's a growing category. And again, it's about getting that sensible regulation in place so that we can make sure that we do have a legal pathway forward, because that's what's going to help get the bigger distributors, the bigger retailers involved in this category. Are there licenses required? We get this one a lot. We're starting to see more and more requests for licenses. It's pretty much standard for adult beverage groups to have to get licenses. There are hemp licenses in a lot of markets. So we are seeing that happen more and more. In the future, we might see things like a federal license. So these will be things that we keep our eye on, but these do exist. And it's all about checking with your state to see what the regulations require. And these hemp licenses are typically not overly expensive. So this usually is something that is relatively easily achievable. A lot of this we've kind of talked about a little bit already. In terms of documentation that a distributor can ask for, obviously there's chain of custody, there's the certificate of analysis. There's a lot of documentation you can ask for. Brands have also been asked for recall history. One thing I do advise for distributors is if you ask for recall history and there has been a recall, check why that recall happened. Sometimes the recall happened because the label requirements for that state changed and the labels were no longer compliant. It doesn't mean the beverage wasn't safe. So I think a lot of people assume that the word recall means, oh, the product wasn't safe, it was pulled off shelves. Sometimes it's a technicality. So make sure you double check that, because you don't want to discount a brand that could be really good for your market because of something that's kind of misunderstood, if you will. And then you can also ask to talk to their supply chain partners. That is something that's very common. When I worked at Source, which was one of the emulsion technologies in the space, when I worked there, I used to take calls all the time for our clients and working with their distributors, working with their retailers to make them feel comfortable about the technology, about the ingredients being used, the process. And, for a lot of people on this call, they probably are aware emulsion technology isn't necessarily new. It's been improved to be more effective with cannabinoids, but emulsion emulsion technology was designed for beverage. So this is something that we can get people familiarized with and comfortable with relatively easily with some explanation. And again, full transparency is how you build trust. And I will say, if you have a supplier if you're a brand and you have a supplier in your supply chain that isn't willing to provide certain documentation or certain information you're asking for, it might be a red flag. It might be worth kind of, second guessing whether that's the right partner for you, because you need full transparency. And in the future, when we are truly regulated and have some standardization, those audits and that paper trail is going to be required. So it's about preparing yourself for the future as well. Insurance, and this is where we're going to talk to Adam a little bit. He is the insurance guru, if you will. And like I said, I've gone to Adam a number of times and asked him questions about, hey, are event permits available in this market? And he's been able to come through numerous times. So, Adam, if you want to give us, a kind of a brief overview of kind of what you've seen in the insurance space over the last year or so, and how it's advanced and changed and what's available for, brands, retailers, and distributors.
Sure. First of all, I love this presentation, Diana. You're really awesome at what you do, and thank you for leading the charge and all of the things you do with CABA and outside. So thank you. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone on this call probably feels similarly, so I will say that from everybody. Insurance. A lot to say, and I'll try and be as linear as possible. The good news is, times are changing, and I think they're changing in a positive fashion. So a couple years ago, when I started having conversations with insurance carriers, there certainly weren't a large number of them interested in hearing more once I started talking about hemp-derived THC. One of the words I heard Diana mention a bunch was this word education. And that's so crucial when we talk about insurance, because from taking a big giant step back, I mean, insurance is predicated or exists because there's loss history, right? Insurance carriers understand in general businesses what kind of losses they can expect from certain industries. We don't really have that data for hemp-derived THC beverages in the same way. So a lot of our job as a broker has been to educate carriers as to what it is we're talking about when we're talking about hemp-derived THC beverages, and in particular, low dose, which is the key in my mind, low dose beverages, low dose hemp-derived THC beverages. So, and I appreciate Diana pulled up what I had sent to her yesterday on this slide, and I'm going to not read it verbatim, but just talk at it. These risks are very similar to this risk, I should say, is similar to other beverage risks, right? The same exposures exist for a hemp-derived THC beverage as any other beverage or consumable. The real question is, are there markets willing to understand what this particular exposure is, absent of that loss history? And are they willing to underwrite it, again, absent of that loss history? And the good news, again, which I started with, is the answer is yes, there are carriers out there, and that number has increased from 2 years ago to where we're at today. So I did list there, and you can see there's, obviously the largest exposure for a beverage brand, let's start there, is the product's liability insurance. We have clients for whom we procure product liability insurance. We have multiple carriers now at this point, which is great, because there's some competition, and the more carriers we have, the better pricing hopefully we'll get. Property insurance, general liability, cyber liability, product recall is something that we've been able to procure for brands in this space. And then some of the management liability policies like directors and officers liability and employment practices liability. Now, the big one tucked all the way at the bottom is the one I'm certainly most excited about, and I think will have the biggest impact in terms of making this category normalized, and that's certainly on-premises consumption liability, right? Once we get these beverages into large-scale venues, be it sports arenas or music halls, that is a way in which we can start to really normalize these beverages in a real way. And so it took some time, but I'm happy to report that we do have a carrier presently, and I hope that number will grow to multiple carriers in the future, who again understands this risk and is willing to provide terms for real coverage. When I say real coverage, I'm not interested in selling, and we're not interested in selling a policy that has a number of exclusions, that's not what we're looking to do. The whole idea here is safety first, make sure that all parties um, are covered. So this particular policy, not to get in the weeds, pun intended, but and I can field questions as they come, but I'll just say from a high level, this particular policy is designed and can sit alongside an existing insurance program. So for a venue, let's say, that has a whole host of insurances, including liquor liability, that liquor liability policy will exclude THC. This policy that we've developed will be for THC consumption liability and will similarly exclude liquor. So that's what we're talking about when I say we have that solution today. Let's talk about what we don't have and what's also needed in the same vein. The smaller on-prem exposures, so your bars and your restaurants, I'm not aware of any carrier really willing to put up what I would call true coverage, comprehensive coverage for that kind of exposure yet, but it is something that we're working on. I've been around the country. I've been to various establishments where these beverages exist. I've seen them live. I just want to comment that part of the education in talking to the underwriters is the behavior of those that are seeking these beverages. Okay, so like Diana, I too, when I have these beverages, it's truly an alternative to alcohol. And it's not necessarily, as I've explained to underwriters, I don't equate someone reaching for this beverage to be the same type of consumer that's presently going to a venue and smoking a joint and buying a beer. These are different people in my mind. And I think that I've convinced, and I think carrier underwriters understand that, and that's going to be the behavior, which is why we're able to get this policy that we have today. I'll pause because I know I just said a lot of information. I hear some buzzing and beeping of questions, but Diana, if you want to maybe ask me anything that comes to mind that I might have left out and previously shared with you, I'm happy to field that, or we can go to questions, whatever I'll leave it to you to determine what's best.
I've got a couple questions.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's come up a lot is zebra striping. People who consume an alcoholic beverage and then have a THC beverage. They're
Yeah.
alternating between the two. I've been trying to think of studies that our industry could do or our category could do that would make insurance providers feel more comfortable because they would understand the consumption behavior of this consumer better. Because I think a lot of us have always kind of joked, like if you were at a sporting event and people had THC beverages instead of alcohol, you might have the most mild crowd you've ever had. You're unlikely to get someone who's really, wild and out of control, because I think the expectation is very different than the reality of what that is. And I know for me, when I'm doing the zebra striping, if you will, that I'm more mindful of what I'm drinking, and I don't have that need to chase the next beverage the way I do if I'm drinking like a bottle of wine, where I'm like, oh, my glass is empty, it's time to refill. It becomes like a cycle. And there is, I think, a different consumption method and pattern for people. And I do think that ultimately, I'd be interested in us trying to find studies that would be helpful for insurance providers to have a little bit more faith or be more open to ensuring, on-premise consumption at larger venues and such and such. Are there any studies, or have you gotten requests from any of your providers that are asking for information that we can't yet provide?
I haven't, but you bring up something that, I'm happy you brought it up because it's really, in my mind, the 500, whatever the weight of that gorilla is that we talk about, like it's a problem what you're speaking about in terms of insurance, frankly, because, as, and this is going to get really technical, I don't mean it to be, but, ideally, here, let me ask it this way. Here, let me present the question, right? Like, let's say we have someone that consumes both, and zebra stripes, as the term is, right? And there's, God forbid, a problem and a claim. That is a problem, Diana, right? We know that is. We haven't seen that yet. We don't know what it's going to look like, what that claim will look like. So the question is, will an on-premise location try to only have the people that are choosing to, buy these THC beverages, like have a risk? I don't know what the protocol will be, but going down the road into the future, like we are in the first inning here, I think an eventuality needs to be at some point, and I'm not saying we're going to get there tomorrow or in the second inning even, but I think we need a policy, frankly, that's more of a intoxicant liability policy, where on the same policy, you'll have a rate tied to alcohol and you'll have a rate tied to THC. And therefore, if there is, God forbid, a claim, there won't be finger pointing between the liquor liability carrier and the THC carrier. You know, that will solve that issue that you bring up in terms of the zebra striper. If that's a term, I made that up. I don't know if that's what someone is, but if someone's drinking both, you know, that helps to solve that problem as far as what happens if there is a claim that arises. Now, that being said, I will also say in the same breath, you know, we're not creating, in my mind, a new exposure here, right? There are plenty of people that go to sporting events and concerts that are drinking and eating a gummy before or smoking a joint at. So, and we see what the losses are presently what they are, and we're not creating new losses, is what I'm saying. So, you know, I share what I think is your opinion or what you projected in terms of what does it look like when there's a crowd that's choosing one versus the other. It's going to look different. And I think it's natural to compare somewhat alcohol to the alcohol alternatives in terms of what we think the claims will look like. I have to imagine that the claims will certainly at a minimum look very different from alcohol when we look at the claims that arise from THC beverage. And what's better? What does better mean? You know, whatever better means, I think the loss history will look better, again, in quotes, for these alternative beverages than what we see arise from alcohol, unfortunately, particularly at sports arenas and things of that nature. But we're making progress. I mean, I think right now, like the fact that there are multiple carriers interested in quoting and underwriting these risks and wanting to learn more, your words, the cat's out of the bag, my analogy, the toothpaste is out of the tube. Like, I think it's imperative that we get some real successes here and start to bind some of these policies that allow for these beverages to exist and be sold on premises, large scale, so that we can start to see what loss history does in fact look like and evolve with that. You know, there's a lot to be learned as we become live in these various venues. So it's an exciting time, and I'm very hopeful. And I'm certainly, as you know, Diana, doing all that I can to be helpful to all stakeholders involved to try and push these beverages forward and this whole conversation forward, break down stigma, things of that nature, so that we get to a place where these beverages being available at all these venues is ubiquitous. It's like in a couple of years' time, in my mind, if I had a crystal ball, I look around and this is an option that's available. You know, to borrow words from my friend and our friend Bob Galligan, like everyone deserves a bar stool. And that's very much how I believe and want to support that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for, providing that context. We did have a great comment here. Someone commented that, what's very difficult is with THC, there's no way to test intoxication levels. This is an ongoing issue. It is. There's been research done to try and create a similar like breathalyzer thing. None of them have really panned out, candidly. It is something that we need to determine. It might be that we have to come up with a field test. Field tests make me nervous only because sober, I can't do the alphabet backwards. So I feel like we really have to be careful when you're coming up with field tests like that.
Yeah.
But it is certainly a concern. And I do think that that's going to be one of the problems that comes up for on-premise when it comes to liability is the fact that you really can't test for it. What I do think is helpful having THC beverages available at, bars and restaurants is, to your point, Adam, people consume and go outside, they leave the bar, go outside, smoke a joint, come back, go right back to their vodka soda. You have no idea as a bartender how much that person consumed outside. Now, typically when you're smoking, like it hits instantly and then its offset is generally faster because of the consumption method. So sometimes that could be looked at as a benefit, meaning, you're going to like break through that cycle pretty fast, whereas the beverage has that 60 to 90 minutes, right? But it's much more gradual because you're sipping on it and the onset time is being, taking as you're consuming it, it takes a little bit of time for you to feel it, and you're not, generally not shotgunning these beverages, you're sipping on them. So you're not getting all the THC at once. But I do think that, when you give people accessibility to the active ingredient they want in a setting that they are already at, that they hide less of what they're consuming. Meaning like they're not sneaking a gummy in and eating the gummy and you never know when that's going to hit. And if you didn't sell it to them, you don't know. I do think that on-premise consumption for edibles is something that is going to be very difficult. I don't know how an insurance provider would feel about that because the experience is too inconsistent. Beverage is the most approachable in that sense because it is consistent and the consumer can kind of build their high, if you will. So I do think that it's a safer option having it available. But again, we need more studies, I think, on that. In terms of, I know you've worked with a number of brands. What insurance, when it comes to, let's say, an event like a pop-up event or a weekend festival, how difficult is it to come up to get insurance for one of those events? Is that based on what else is being served
Well,
and the
I think
activity?
it's well, a couple things. One, I was very fortunate to get a call from you not so long ago for the Mindful Drinking Fest and was able to have a carrier turn around a quote in pretty short order for that event, which, the Mindful Drinking Fest had at its event tasting of THC beverages, which is the reason why I got the phone call because the current carrier couldn't provide that sort of coverage. So look, I think I'm willing and we're willing to do the work and to engage whenever there's an opportunity. My promise to anyone I work with is if it's available, I'm going to find it. And if it's not available yet, I'm going to work on it until we get a solution. That's the best I can say. I do think, each one kind of stands on its own, Diana, in terms of what the event looks like, where it is, what other, exposures are there, is there live music, just as an example. Who knows what it might be, but I think each one is unique unto itself. We have the good fortune, NFP, that is, that, we have a relationships rather, with a number of carriers that understand this space, as I've noted that, we've educated these carriers and they understand my relationship within the space and they understand this is not a one-off and done, that there's a lot behind this. And similarly, I will say, it's my firm belief that once we do get into one of these large venues and sell one of these policies, it will be a ripple effect or the positive version of a ripple effect. I don't know if ripple is a bad connotation, but I think, one of the things I saw last week, which gave me, air in my sails is, I saw Live Nation made an announcement about, introducing 100 new venues to athletic beer, the non-alcoholic beer. So, to me, that was just screaming that the people have spoken. It's not anti-alcohol. I want to be very clear. That's
Yeah.
not our position, but the position is certainly there are people that want other, whether it's straight NA or whether it's a non-alcoholic adult beverage that does have, a lift of some sort, whether it's THC or CABA or kratom, whatever it might be. The people have spoken. And I think that now, it's our responsibility to figure out how to safely, take safe measures, whether it's through insurance or other, to protect all the stakeholders involved, the consumer, the venue, everyone in between. That's the calling. That's the job.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And it gives a lot of clarity. I think, like I've always said, I think this category really busts open when on premise becomes normalized. When we start seeing bartenders using the multi-serving spirits like products to make
Yeah.
mocktails at the bar. I think that's where the next wave of growth is coming from. And I think the group that comes up with a solution for these large venues, it's going to be like breaking the dam, right? People are going
Yeah,
to start jumping
that
at these
that's
opportunities.
the plan. And honestly, I want to be very clear. Like this is not, to me, there's a lot of pie. Just be very clear about that, right? Like if another broker were to come in and sell a policy, that helps all other brokers that are looking to do the same thing. So, to me, this is an area in which, we have to work together, frankly, whether it's internally and then, I think about the folks involved with alcohol and all of them, everyone that's trying to push these things forward. There's a sense of camaraderie here that I appreciate, and I'm here for it. And you know, it's very purpose driven. So, you know, I really do appreciate what you're doing, as I said, with CABA, and certainly what the Hemp Beverage Alliance is doing as well, and other folks at US Hemp Roundtable, all the people that are doing the work. Just my hat is off to them, and I'm proud to be amongst them, helping in any way I can.
Well, thank you for your help because, you know, this is something we really want to see get opened up, you know, not only for this year, but for the future, right? This is where we a lot of people consider these products social beverages. And we can't consume them socially at bars and restaurants right now in some markets. And, you know, it's great when you go to Minnesota and it's completely normalized. And, you know, that menu that's on the screen right now is from Minnesota. I remember seeing it. It was the first time I had seen a menu that had THC beverages on it. And everyone in Minnesota was like, yeah, that's how it is here. Like, act like you've been here before.
Mhm.
The big moment was the fact that it wasn't a big moment. Like no one high-fived me when I ordered my drink. It was, you know, a big deal for me, but that's how it is every day there. So I think, you know, on-premise consumption is going to continue to be a big focal point. We are seeing a lot more. I mean, we all know that the stigma and how people view these products changes the second they try one. You know, I wish that I could just go on the hill and crack open a can in every member's office and tell them just take a sip because they're going to know like it's not nearly as scary as what people originally thought. I'm a DARE baby. I went through the DARE program where they teach you that if you consume this, the next day you're on heroin. That's not the case. And you're also, if you're drinking a low dose beverage, especially if you're starting off with a 2 or 3 milligram drink, the you know, it's not going to hit you like a train. And I think that's the expectation sometimes is that it's going to be this super intense experience. And it doesn't have to be that. Sure, if you want that, you can go and get a, you know, a higher dose gummy from a dispensary. You could, you know, smoke a joint that has, you know, higher THC percentage potency. But the reality is this is so different. And there's so many events I've been to where when we're sampling, someone who's never tried it before gives it a whirl and goes, this tastes really good. And they expect it also to taste like grass, which I always think is so funny. They don't realize like we're not lying when we say these taste good. Which does bring up, I guess, one other concern that we've gotten pushback on a little bit, which I think, you know, ultimately it's again about education and parents parenting. But the fact that these products taste good. Uh, with alcohol, beer, wine, typically for a more sophisticated palate, kids take a sip of that, and we're talking young kids, right? We're not, if a 15-year-old's trying to get a hold of something intoxicating in their parents' house, they're probably going to figure out a way to do that regardless of the education component. But, you know, when we're talking about like a 5-year-old, many 5-year-olds still struggle opening a can of, you know, soda. But, you know, some of these beverages have flavors like root beer. And, you know, if it's a low dose product, um, you know, the idea would be like, okay, the kid might drink it because you're not going to taste the THC. You're not going to taste anything bitter at the end where they'd go, ew, gross. Now, many of these drinks are carbonated, and some young kids really do feel that carbonation is spicy. That's the word they like to use. But, you know, that is, you know, something that, you know, we hear about a lot. And I don't know, Adam, has that been anything that people have brought up about on-premise consumption? Obviously, we're targeting 21 plus, but
Yeah, no,
has
it
anyone
really
brought that?
it really hasn't. I mean, from the insurance
Okay.
carrier perspective, they're most concerned about the regulation, right? And does it comply with the Farm Bill, and is it appropriate in the state in which we're talking about? I mean, there are other questions, and I'm not really sure of anything because we don't know anything that we don't know yet, right? Right. But
Right, right.
as we progress, you know, we will get some more of these questions. And frankly, look, we can't be naive and assume there's not going to be losses. You know, I talk about losses of this nature compared to, you know, alcohol. Like, of course, there's going to be losses, and certainly as we get that loss activity and see what those losses look like, we're going to have to make some changes, right? The carrier's going to have to make some changes, the brands and the stadiums might have to make some changes. Like we're going to have to figure it out together, right? Together is the way forward. If we can't assume we have all the answers, because no one does. We just don't know what we don't know yet. But again, to kind of leave everyone on a positive note, we have options, and there's options are growing, and the interest is growing, both from the consumer perspective, certainly, and even the insurance carrier perspective. Look, they're in this to make money, right? That's their
Right.
goal. They're not necessarily mission driven the way we are, but they see that there's a huge growth potential here. And that's why they're here. Not to say that they're not well intentioned, some of them probably are, but they're not here for that necessarily. And so the fact that there's more and more of those carriers showing up to underwrite, to me, screams of the fact that they see too, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And it's only going to get bigger. We are really, as I said, in the first inning. I hope it's a really long game. I hope it's a great game. I have every belief that it will be. So
Yeah.
we just have to take all the steps to make sure that it is.
One thing that, has come up in conversation, particularly with some of the regulators, because they see 10 milligrams as being high dose. And again, for someone brand new to THC beverage, you're not starting at 10, or you shouldn't be starting at 10. But knowing that there are so many 10 milligram beverages out there, have you heard or do you think it would be appealing to insurance providers if, let's say, let's say any state, I'm just going to pick a state, Florida, let's say they cap it at 10 milligrams. 10 milligrams can be sold through anywhere that has a liquor license, but for on-premise consumption, they cap it at 5, meaning they don't
Yeah.
allow anything higher than 5 to
I
be sold
mean,
there.
I'm open. I personally, I'm open. I agree with you. I mean, I don't think anyone should be having a 10 milligram in that public sort of sessionable setting. Like that to me doesn't equate with the purpose of these beverages. If the purpose of the beverages is an alcohol alternative, I don't think, again, people are reaching for these beverages to have like some crazy high experience. That's really not what these beverages exist for in my estimation.
Right.
So I'd be perfectly fine with a 5 milligram cap myself,
Mhm.
to see that is out there. But we'll see. Again, we'll just have to see what each state is comfortable with and what the regulations are and where we get. I mean, I think your point, all of your points are very salient, but like certainly regulate us, right? Like we want to participate. We want to be regulated. We want to do the right thing with safety at the forefront. We
Yep.
help us help everyone else be safe is the message. We want to protect the consumer and we want to protect bad actors from being bad actors. Like if we can have the best in class across the spectrum in this sector be the ones that are making the beverages and selling them, that's a great scenario. Great scenario.
Speaking of the best actors, best in class, there's a lot of great brands out there. How do they, if they're looking at an opportunity to sell on premise at maybe a large, entertainment venue, is there certain documentation or anything that they can do to best present themselves so that they're more likely to be able to get someone to underwrite their program? Are there any recommendations for brands to keep in mind?
Honestly, what we need, honestly, is at bats. I'm going to keep with the baseball metaphor. We need at bats, right? So, while most of my relationships presently are with brands, and not necessarily the venues who, to be clear, it's the venue who's going to be securing the
Right,
policy, right? The
right.
brand year one may very well pay for that policy, but it's the venue that's going to be the named insured on that policy. My request or what I put out into the world is if there's a brand out there that wants to be in a stadium, I'm happy to walk into that stadium with that brand representing a solution that will certainly be a sticking point as to whether or not it's feasible and have that discussion. Again, each at bat might be somewhat different depending on which state you're in, et cetera. But the more at bats we get, the more likelihood that we're going to get hits, and one hit's going to beget another one, and we'll start to, again, really using this baseball metaphor to the
Yeah,
hilt. We're
I
going to
love
start to
it.
score runs. I mean, that's it, and we're going to run up the score, and then game over. Like that's how it progresses in my mind. That's the way this should work and will work. So
In
that's
terms
that's
of
the message.
the venues, obviously it's going to vary by state in terms of what states permit on premise and all of that. Are there certain markets right now that have been easier to get insurance for venues for, just because of how the regulations are, or because it's a little bit more normalized there?
Candidly, we've only had a few at bats, frankly,
Okay.
right? Like the insurance policies that we've written, and we've written plenty, are for products liability mainly. That's like the biggest
Mhm.
exposure. We can do
Right.
that all day long. We really haven't progressed to the point, because you would have heard about it and it would have been on front page news, frankly, not as an insurance story, mind you, but as a societal story. We're now going to be selling on premises an adult beverage next to alcohol that's not alcohol. That's a front page news story. right? Like that's a big deal when that happens. And once that happens, again, it's my belief, once we get into one, others will follow suit naturally because the people are going to know and the people want it. And the more, to your point, like you've seen it, I've seen it. Once people start to understand what these beverages are, and more importantly, what they aren't, they really avail themselves as a real option for other. That's appealing, you know, and that's going to be the ticket forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to give it another minute for anyone who wants to ask a question and throw it in the chat. Um, and then we can kind of move forward and wrap it up a little. Thank you, Adam, for all of that. That was really helpful. And,
My
I
pleasure.
think there was a request for your contact information. I will make sure that in the follow-up email, we include it. But Adam, if you want to throw your email and info into that chat.
Is the post, I don't know if anyone will see it, but I'll do
I
it.
think you can, if you go to the chat, you should be able to send it to everyone.
I don't have that option, but you're welcome to. I'll send it to you and you can just copy and paste it if that
Yeah,
works.
that's fine.
Adam Wilkin,
Thank you.
AdamDonutsNFP.com. You can start with that and that should be good. I'll
Oh,
put my LinkedIn as well in case that's helpful.
okay, here we go. So thank you for
Super.
that. Mhm.
Well, thank you, Diana. This was great. Thanks everyone who joined. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. And, we have there's obviously we talked a lot today about the insurance. These are just kind of some best practices. We do have a lot of resources. If you guys need anything or looking for help at the state or federal level, we'll create tools based on what people need and what's being recommended. Also want to call out Aficionado. They've got a number of on-premise retail locations, but also restaurants that are having their staff trained on understanding this category. This QR code will take you to their website. They do have, I believe, a free like 15-minute education session, but they have this whole certification program, and it was designed to be like the Cicerone program for beer. So I definitely recommend that, if you're wanting to really dive into this space and you want your team to feel really confident selling and understanding how THC beverages can be consumed, this is a program that will teach you that and be able to give you a little bit of the history as well as, why this is, how this emerged, why these are able to be sold outside of the dispensary channel, and then where it's going. So I definitely recommend the Aficionado program. It's run by some really great people who originated actually in the alcohol space as well. Obviously, if you need anything, you can contact me. We are also, our website will be live tomorrow. So we will be pushing that out and I will send that in the follow-up email as well. We are going to make all of our assets available for download online. We are doing that because we want to be fully transparent. We are not planning on changing our stances. Our code of conduct will evolve with the marketplace as needed, but we want to be fully transparent, but we also want to make our tools available to anyone who is looking for support at the state level or looking to understand the category. But if there are other tools that you guys need, feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you need additional support, and we'll figure out how we can help. On that note, because it doesn't look like we have any other questions, I will let you go. But thank you so much, Adam. This was really helpful. Let me know how I can continue to help you with any of your opportunities as well.
Will do. Thank you. This was awesome. You're awesome, Diana. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate
Take
the
care.
support.
You bet.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.